You're live.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the 54th week of the Free Assange Vigil. Joining me as a co host today, I have, as always, Steve Poikinen with me. We are joined by Nikki and hopefully soon Victor. But first, just to kind of break down some numbers, it is day 3,511 of the illegal and arbitrary detention of Julian Assange. It is day 464 since the WikiLeaks publisher was trafficked from the Ecuadorian embassy to Belmarsh prison following a $4.2 billion IMF loan to Ecuador. It is 51 days until the second phase of Julian Assange's show trial and extraordinary rendition hearing. It is 1,141 days of incarceration for Reality Winner. But in some good news, it is day 127 of Chelsea Manning's freedom. And real quick on that note, Chelsea Manning has started streaming on Twitch again. I'm going to put the link in the chat for everybody. She did put up a new regular streaming schedule. So if you could just go over there and show her some love, hop on, subscribe to her on Twitch. It's a great way to show support and a way to say thank you to her. But with that, how are you today, Steve?
I'm doing all right, man. I woke up late because I started rereading Cypherpunks like a couple of nights ago, and I've been coming home just completely like annihilated from work all week this week. So I get about 15 pages into it, and then I pass out, and I wake up several hours later, and like the book is still in my hand. So I read again until I pass back out. But yeah, I woke up and I looked at my phone and I was like, oh fuck, I turned off my alarm and went right back to sleep again. Better wake up and start coffee now. And so I did, and now I'm here. And so is Victor, and that's phenomenal. I'm stoked for that. I really enjoyed the vigil the last time the two of you were on. Victor, we did take your advice. We stopped using the language of our oppressors, and we have not used the word extradition in relation to Julian Assange since. We are trying to get other people to jump on board to call this a rendition hearing and show trial or a slow-moving broad daylight kidnapping. So I hope that this picks up a little bit. I've seen it kind of proliferate around a few of the Assange circles on the internet. And I do. It's my hope that as we get closer and closer to this show trial, that more people globally kind of grasp the seriousness of the situation. That this is in fact the absolute death of investigative journalism. Are we, if we go through, or if the Five Eyes are allowed to go through with this kidnapping. Nikki, it is good to see you again. How are you?
Good to see you.
And Victor, I'm also delighted to see you. How are you doing today, sir?
Very well, thank you. Can you hear me?
Can hear you just fine.
Okay, glad to be here.
Your video seems to be frozen, but
Yes,
I can hear you.
Yes, it appears to be so.
You maybe hop out and hop back in. I don't know. Depends on whether you might be, if you're using a VPN, it might slow it down a little bit.
No VPN.
Okay. Real quick, guys, Action for Assange is trying to get back to Washington, D.C. In order to do that, we have a GoFundMe up. Just yesterday, we were able to. There you are.
Am I moving?
You are.
Okay.
Kick that one. And just yesterday, we were able to put the deposit down on our lodgings in DC, and it wiped us out. The entire GoFundMe is gone.
What do you mean?
So we have about 51 days to raise just under $7,000, and we are scared shitless. So we need your help. We need you to, if you have donated before, please donate again. If you can't donate, please share that link, because at this point, we're the entire U.S. presence for the Free Assange movement in protest. So we need your help. We need your physical support in Washington, D.C. as well. If you are anywhere near the nation's capital, this is a 3-week hearing. So at any point in those 3 weeks, if you can get your narrow or ample behind to Washington, D.C., please do that. And we would love to see you there.
Yes.
That's my fundraising pitch for the morning. I know Josh is going to yell at me if we have it here. I'm going to give this pitch like 3 more times throughout the broadcast today. But, you know, for now, I'm done.
And so we generally put out a call to action every week. But MEB and her group over at Wise Up Action have been doing an awesome job putting out actions, getting people inspired, doing a lot of work on the ground in London. So this week, as opposed to putting out our own, we're just pointing people back to her website and her action page to get kind of just familiar with what she does. So I'm going to put that link in the chat for everybody today. And this is just her ideas for action list. But I do recommend just going through her website because she has a lot of awesome information up there.
Okay.
But so before the stream, actually, we were talking, Nikki, about just the state of where the cases and the possible situations going into September that we're facing. So I just wanted to pass it off to you first to kind of let you go through some of your thoughts on what Julian's facing right now and kind of where we're leading to in the next 50 days.
Well, as some people may know, I lodged another complaint against the Chief Magistrate, Emma Arbuthnot. The first one I lodged was in November 2019, and they dismissed it. And then I went to the Ombudsman, and the Ombudsman didn't think that the JCIO did anything wrong. So I lodged another complaint about misconduct, judicial misconduct. The reason I waited this long is because I did an FOI from the Ministry of Justice to get the terms of appointment and conditions of service that would apply to her. And it took the Ministry of Justice 4 months to get this one document. Anyway, it probably isn't exactly the document, but it's close enough. The provisions to do with judicial misconduct are outlined in detail in there. So this time I lodged another complaint with the JCIO, which is the committee, the judicial committee that looks into judicial misconduct. Basically, when one looks at the terms of appointment and conditions of service together with the legislation that regulates conduct of judges, I think we're well within the legislation that would, if anything, functioned in the UK, that would actually would get her removed for misconduct. So the point now is to speed up that process because, you know, it's a very stultified bureaucracy and I don't want to be waiting months before I get a response. So what we did then was we put out an open letter, which is on Emmy Butland's site, Wise Up Action has published the open letter addressed to the Lord Chancellor and the Chief, oh my God. Anyway, the two guys that are in charge of this problem of judicial misconduct. So it's trying to get fast track a process that should have happened a long time ago. And as I was saying earlier before we came on live, they've broken every single rule in the book. And so there's nothing really to abide by, really, is there? So they're making up rules, and we'll make up our own rules, and we'll see where it gets us. But there's been quite a good response to the open letter already. So hopefully we'll get a lot of people, even if they don't put their signatures on, it's good to have their comments. So the comments are very positive. People are outraged, actually. When one looks at the comments, they're outraged about this situation in itself, this corrupt judge in the sewer of corruption who is just, allowed to run this circus as if it's all normal. So we need to go on that offensive quite vigorously.
We have the open letter up on the screen right now, and Josh is scrolling through it. If there is a particular paragraph or section you would like us to highlight, please let us know, and we'll focus on that for a moment, and we can go through it.
The open letter is a summary of the complaint. The complaint was attached because the open letter refers to it. So in the interest of transparency...
Well, I meant the complaint. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. And what you've got is the open letter, so it's not the full complaint. But I'm going to try and see it. I'm not seeing it for some reason. Let me see if I can... Why can't I see what you're scrolling down on? I can't see the scrolling.
You won't be able to see it.
We can't see it on our side. But we just have it up on the Wise Up Action website.
Yeah.
So
well, basically, it just quickly goes through what terms of appointment were breached and what law was breached. But I tried to simplify it because it's kind of difficult for people to be sponsoring, advocating, endorsing something that they have difficulty understanding. If anyone wants to then look at the full complaint, they can click on the complaint and see the full complaint. So yeah, my view at this point is we can't let this woman get away with what she's doing. She holds the key to the torture chamber, so we have to get the key away from her and hopefully get rid of her as well, if possible. The other thing that, if we could discuss, was the offensive against the mainstream media, because I looked at how that's functioning, and I looked at the DSMA committee, DSMA, which, don't ask me what it stands, defense something. Anyway, it's basically the Ministry of Defense pretending to have an independent body that has nothing to do with them. But in reality, when one looks at the structure and who pays who funds what you've got is a bunch of people from the Ministry of Defense, irrespective of whether they parade as independent people, together with the main players in the mainstream media, one of them being the BBC, which I think is outrageous, because the BBC is a publicly funded station, channel, whatever. They should not be in bed with the Ministry of Defense. So these two players, the Ministry of Defense, together with the mainstream 18 members, I think it is, of the big shots from corporate media, well, one of them is publicly owned, make decisions about what's going to be published if they think it's sensitive material. And so I did ask for information from Brigadier Dodds. There you go. The secretary of the DSMA is from the army, but he's a brigadier. He wouldn't give me the information I asked for. And then, funnily enough, I found some of it on Wikipedia for anyone who wants to know what D notices have gone out from 2003. They can check it out on Wikipedia.
And this is... so the whole concept of the D notice is, it seems to me, to encourage self-censorship among journalistic outlets, and the culture of self-censoring is one of those things that permeates down through just an individual, where I'm probably going to use the word culture 9 billion times today, but it creates a culture of conformity, and it I guess teaches and instructs private citizens to self-censor even when they're communicating with other individual private citizens, because if the media is setting the example for what we learn and how we learn after we're out of school, right, then their own self-censorship, be it voluntary or mandated by their government, is what is instructing the public and teaching the public how to learn and think, which is totally fucking backwards from the way that it's supposed to go. Like, we're supposed to have access to primary source documentation and first-person accounts of what went down, and then we're supposed to be able to digest that information and process it in a way that it doesn't have outside spin influencing the way that we think about it. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say they prefer for us to find things out 45 years later, like the palace letters, the Queen sacking Whitlam in Australia. Because what are we going to do about it now? I mean, the Queen was instrumental. They were trying to keep those palace papers or letters, the palace letters secret. Even now they tried to, because, you know, she's supposedly not a political person. And one reason she said she couldn't get involved in the Assange case is because she's not a political person. But she's very political when she wanted to sack an elected prime minister in 1975. And she did. So this information just came out. What are we supposed to do with information that comes out 45 years later? What can we fix? What can we fix 45 years later? They destroyed the country for 45 years.
Right. 45 years later, while the other issues of the country are so massive that seems like, who cares about something that happened back in the 70s?
Yeah, we care, but what can we do about it? Nothing.
Right.
We could do about it. And so, you know, going back to DSMA, the DSMA system exists in Australia, and it's even worse. It's even worse because they can actually, they say they can expose, the journalists who disobey could be exposed to criminal penalties. So it's even, you know, even stronger in Australia. And right now you interviewed David McBride. So, and I did watch some of that. And what they do is isolate the whistleblower from the journalist. They go after the whistleblower first, and then they go, I mean, this is the modus operandum. So divide and conquer. And once they get, if they get David McBride, then they'll definitely go after the journalist, and then you know, it'll just keep getting worse. But what I'm saying is that, you know, we're in a stage now where we are pre out in your face fascism, okay, like terrorist fascism. But I think we are already in fascism. You know, from the moment where there's no free press, and where the, you know, once a derelict type of corrupt government has the media and the courts in their pockets, we're already not in democracy, and we're already well on the way to the open in your face terroristic type of fascism. So if we're not in it already, we're not far from it. So
I would say here in the U.S., we're already there. We have mass videos of police officers going around smashing storefronts, lighting cars on fire,
rolling up and grabbing people off the fucking street and throwing them into a goddamn unmarked rental van.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I think the state is
confirmed.
Yes.
Yeah.
In Cincinnati, which is about 4 hours south of me, they rounded up a little over 100 people and put them in an open air courtyard and kept them there for 10 hours with no food, no water, no shelter. So the level that our government is going at this point is just needs to be turned around, and it's institutions like WikiLeaks and people like Julian that put themselves in personally detrimental positions to be able to broadcast to the world, hey, this is happening. So the fact that while all of these other things are going on, the free press is literally just getting ground now to not even having an illusion anymore is it's scary.
It is very scary. You know, people need to open history books. You know, it's not the first time. This is actually exactly the way it happened. This is straight from the manual of fascism. So it's we still have time to stop it, but for some reason people are just, you know, hoping. That's why I hate the word hope. They're hoping it'll go away. Superman will fly in, Batman, Robin, I don't know. Some Marvel character from Hollywood's going to come and fix this. Well,
my grandpa used to say you can hope in one hand and shit in the other and see which one fills up fastest.
Yeah. Well, yeah. No, we've got to get out of this, this shocks. We are massively in a state of shock. And so we don't want to deal with the reality because it's getting uglier and uglier all the time. But if we don't deal with reality today, as ugly as it is, it will get uglier more than what anybody can imagine, because now they've got more technology, at least in Hitler's day, they didn't have all of the tools to be able to cause even more damage than what they did. They managed to kill more than 50 million people in 5 years. Well, imagine with the technology they have now, what they could do. A lot more people could die. And not just die, just live miserably. I mean, if you're going to be that miserable, maybe it's better to be dead. I don't know how bad they can make things for people, how miserable their lives could be. So, yeah, I think that one of the actions that we do when it comes to Julian is not, is connecting war with Julian, because if you're anti-war, you have to defend Julian. You cannot be, they're not separate issues. It's the same issue. And I cannot understand how millions of people went marching against war. Those same millions of people should be marching or doing something, anything to defend Julian, because the two are like, they're connected, totally intimately connected. The same goes for anyone who is against rape, all these women that were screaming, that he was a rapist, which he wasn't, and he isn't, and he never will be. So, the rape victims during war, it's incredible. These women that were supposedly against rape with Julian and have no problem with the Epstein rapists. And they, a lot of them are in power. So there's a lot of disconnected minds. I don't know how they're thinking about this. It's all, for me, Julian is connected to all of that corruption, war, whatever you like, all of that mayhem that we are forced to witness right now. And some of us are moving ahead to knock these their actions down. But we need more people. That's a reality. We need more. We need to grow our army. That's what we need, because they're united and we're not.
Victor, I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Oh, you're muted. I'm sorry.
I've got this theory that basically the psychopaths or sociopaths are in power roughly around in every single Western country. It's not a matter of politics, left or right. It's a problem of a certain type of people with a certain type of mindset that have taken advantage of, I don't know what, perhaps a confusion of the aftermath of the fall of the socialism or communism in the Eastern countries. Whatever happened, slowly but certainly they took power in most of the fields, be it cultural, media, and political field. So you don't fight against those kind of people the same way as you fight against a political enemy, someone who is who doesn't share your political opinions, but who has a right mind. I think we're dealing with people who are pretty sick in their heads. Something's wrong with them, be they on the left or supposedly on the left or on the right. It's not a matter of political opinions as far as I'm concerned. And what's interesting is that these letters that Nicki has been sending and the reactions that she's been receiving shows that these, what are they, bureaucrats, apparently are trying to save the day, refusing to do basically their job. What have they got? They've got nothing to gain in it. And what have they got against Julian Assange? Absolutely nothing. Maybe that they weren't even in office when all this started, you know. But yeah, they seem to be quite fine with the idea that no, they won't give the information, knowing perfectly well that they should be giving it. And if they were actually human beings, that they would actually be eager to give it, knowing exactly what's going on.
If you remember your Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yes.
And I've got an echo coming from someone. Maybe it's Josh. But if you remember that, the most brutal race in the Hitchhiker's Guide were the Vogons, who were the bureaucrats of the galaxy.
Big fat
and
guys.
It seems like the bureaucrats that we have right now would put the Vogons to shame. Like, the only thing separating the people who are in charge of approving or denying freedom of information requests from the Vogons is really bad poetry. And we don't know if those people actually write really bad poetry or not. So the similarities are just fucking gay ridiculous.
Perfect. I've got the feeling that these guys would be like, where do you want to send this train? To Auschwitz? Okay, I'll sign it.
Right. No, they're more concerned on whether or not the train shows up on time than the reason for it leaving.
Yeah.
That's where we're at right now. This is why my refrain on Slow News Day is we live in a fucking cartoon, because this is such cartoonish behavior from not just from unelected bureaucrats, but from state appointed magistrates, from elected members of parliament or members of the U.S. Congress. It is counterintuitive to the rhetoric of a free society. And we do not live in a free society. We live in a heavily monitored, heavily surveilled society where a journalist and publisher can be kidnapped in broad daylight and dragged out of an embassy where he had citizenship, where his citizenship was removed without due process.
And asylum was even worse.
Yeah, asylum revoked without due process.
Without due process, and not only revoked, but they handed him over to the person that was persecuting him. And that's the principle of non-refoulement. Totally in contradiction of international law governing refugees and asylees. You know, it's incredible. And the other, all of the other parties to that convention on refugees and asylum seekers, etc., all of the other parties said nothing at all.
I think we've come to the point where Orwell meets Kafka.
Well, so nation states derive power internally from their ability to violate their own laws with their citizens' consent, or not consent, but passivity, just allowing it to happen without resistance. And I think what we're seeing here is the first act of whatever people refer to as the global capitalist system, or the globalists, or the global international institutions, or the billionaire class, the predator class, whatever people refer to it as. We're seeing this as almost a first act of violating its own laws for its own purpose of creation. And it's kind of terrifying to me to see essentially all these global institutions working simultaneously to take people's privacy rights away, to force experimental medicines on people, while at the same time institutionally removing free speech. And there's just, between all these little things that are almost put in isolation in one another, there's just this terrifying global system that's being created around the surveillance state. So it's horrendous to see. And
yeah, because they're paving the way to full-on fascism, because you can't have fascism from one day to the next. Well, sometimes you can, but usually what they do is they it creeps up on us, and it comes with a human face, the capitalism with a human face, because, fascism is just, an extreme of capitalism. We are in a class war. People don't want to hear about it, but we are in a war. Nobody oppresses somebody just for fun. if you're oppressing a class of people, it's because you're getting something out of it. You're benefiting. Otherwise, there's very few people that would do it just for fun. I'm sure they exist. That's why I don't like to necessarily analyze things from, a mental dysfunction point of view. I think that these people are functioning quite logically for what they want, for their own purposes, and they're getting what they want. The thing is that we have been, on our side, we have been dumbed down. That's the reality. We've been dumbed down. When I look at, for example, just the entertainment business, which has been a huge weapon to shape mentalities, shape consciousness, we're looking at, 2 decades of horror movies? Why is Hollywood producing so many horror movies? It's all about zombies. It's horror. It's
autobiographic
cartoons. No, but it's like, it's supposed to be normal. This is normalizing a sick mind, do you know what I mean? These are sick minds that produce sick content, and this sick content has, there are children that were raised on this sick stuff, and they are adults now. As I was saying before, somebody on Twitter was saying, well, if you want to recruit more people, invent a game where you save Assange. I'm thinking, we're talking about a man's life. We're not going to play a game, invent a game so that we can, manipulate people through this game to save him. How crazy is that? So there's a lot of things to battle, and one of them is actually getting through all the rubbish towards reality, understanding what reality is. And reality, the source of it, the interpretation of it, is not going to come from the mainstream media or the mainstream entertainment business. As far as I'm concerned, all of these people are shaping a world where we stay in our place because we are not as good as they are. See, we don't deserve to smile in our lives, and we don't deserve to have a life. We're supposed to be good little workers. But yeah, I see it politically mainly because I think that they do have a lot to gain by repressing our civil liberties and exploiting as many of us as possible, even more, as much as possible.
Yeah, one of the best ways I've heard it summed up is it's the predator class and the intelligence class versus the poor and the working class. That those
George
are
Carlin,
the
St.
battle
George.
lines. Yeah,
George Carlin had a rant a while back about the owners of the country, and he was talking specifically about the U.S., but I think this can be applied internationally, certainly within the West. Carlin said they want obedient workers, people just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork, and just dumb enough to passively accept all the increasingly shittier jobs with the shittier lower pay, with the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it.
And if they can stop eating, it's even better.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I try to work in like a George Carlin or a Bill Hicks rant and like every other vigil, not to just completely saturate it with it, but I think it's as my patron saints, George Carlin and Bill Hicks, I feel like I owe them a little bit of, I don't know, a genuflection, I guess, without actually dropping to my knees and bowing to them. I feel like a quote suffices. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe I should smoke something for either one of them.
I think that what's happening is that we're what used to be called dissidents, but without the media support from the outside. A few months ago, I was with a bunch of friends, and we were arguing about what ex-USSR was about. I used to be a member of the French Communist Party in the 70s, 80s. So we were discussing that case, and people were talking about freedom and so forth and so on. And then all of a sudden, I realized that they were talking about cases, historical cases of people who had been punished for any reason. And all of a sudden, I realized, what the hell are you people talking about? How many of you, I was talking to my friends, know that I was fired from an American company. I had a very good job as an international consultant. It took them 15 minutes to fire me because I was doing privately solidarity with Cuba. I said, hell, hold on a minute. If I had, I don't know, a kind of anti-CNN, if they had come to my place and covered my story with cameras and so on, I could have been the perfect dissident for those media. And I think we just don't realize that we're starting slowly and more living exactly what those people that were tagged as heroes at that time in other places, well, it's actually happening to us. I often say when the Berlin Wall fell, Stalinism took a step to the west, took advantage of the fall of the wall and said, oh, this looks like a nice place. I'll just walk over there and see what I can do. And slowly, actually, I've been, I had a conversation with the Vice Minister of China a year ago. He was on a tour in France and he wanted to interview people from the alternative media. I don't know exactly why. And we had a discussion. And he asked me, how would you qualify yourself? As a journalist? I said, no, as a publisher of a Dasibao. Dasibao was he didn't appreciate that. I think I made a cultural mistake, but anyhow. And then I said, as a dissident, but I was saying a joke, more or less as a joke. But then I didn't even realize that I had been actually victimized because of my political opinions. And I have been blacklisted. I used to be, as I said, a consultant, but I lost all my customers one by one when my name started to appear on the internet and so forth and so on. I was very good at my job, but who cares about the job, apparently, if your political opinions are in dissent.
A dozen years ago this week, I was fired from my job, which was writing for The Nation. And I was fired by Chris Hayes.
Himself.
Who was the politics editor at The Nation at the time. They had an election blog team, which was the first of its kind for that particular election season. It had been done on other websites before, people who just kind of kept up to, but this was the first time an established magazine had a blog team for the Democratic primary. And I had written a piece called Barack Obama, Reagan with a Tan. And the Nation was not trying to push that narrative. So I wasn't so much fired as I was invited to be successful elsewhere. And then the Nation proceeded to remove everything that I had written from them. And then about 6 months later, I found out that the majority of the things that I had written over the past 10 years prior, all gone from the internet. I could not get a job at another outlet. Every startup magazine that I would write for within 3 to 6 months was bought up by another company, and then all of our content was subsequently removed. It was a frustrating process, to say the least. I had basically quit writing as a result of it. Now I scream on camera. And I have a couple of platforms that I can't be censored on, unlike YouTube, who, completely drowns my content and makes sure that as few people as possible get to see it.
Right. So yesterday, and this is going to sound a little ridiculous, but this just goes to the larger censorship, right? If you scroll through YouTube, you can find the most ridiculous kinds of things, right? Like a guy playing a rubber chicken to songs, like singing them with them, essentially, like just ridiculous stuff. And somehow that gets millions of views and 40,000, 50,000 followers in the course of a year. But we're stuck at just under 3,000 followers trying to proliferate some of the most important information, literally for the sake of just getting it out to the world. And you see the censorship engine just ripping across independent media, from like large independent creators getting just taken off of social media platforms, to the algorithm shifting to be able to drop videos for pronouncing people's names in real time, like the whistleblower for the bullshit story about Donald Trump and what fucking country was that? Ukraine. Sorry.
Yeah, you have to say, like, or Burma says Erica Caramello Bar.
Yeah.
Because you can't say his name, because they'll fucking remove your channel.
And this major
video that Burma's ever had removed was a video where he showed Louis goddamn Gomer saying the guy's name.
And it goes as
Louis
far as
Gomer said his name on camera, and Burma's didn't say it in his live stream. They removed the video entirely. You didn't go after Louis Gomer.
And they even removed the C-SPAN footage of Ron Paul asking, is this person, they were removing that footage, C-SPAN footage of our elected officials from YouTube because they said this name. So I was wondering, Victor, if you could talk a little bit about the state of censorship and kind of how you feel the direction that all that's moving.
Well, I don't know if you guys heard about it, but last week there was a massive leak called the Blue Leaks.
Yeah.
Have you heard about it? And apparently Twitter was censoring any reference, even links tweeted, were apparently deleting them online and quasi instantaneously. I think we've reached new levels.
Oh, now, no, Twitter got hacked the other day.
Yeah, I heard
and
about
all
that.
of the blue checks went down, and an image started circulating of Twitter's moderator's screen, and it had a little button on it that said Trends Blacklist. And it basically, the way that Kim.com described it is that there is a God mode for Twitter where anyone who has access to this particular panel can censor, remove, or blacklist accounts that share information in real time. That's where we're at. Like the government or an intelligence agency that runs the government can step in and alter, remove, or otherwise erase not just posts, but the accounts themselves. It is like, it's a blend. I believe it's more Huxley than Orwell, but it's a blend of like Huxleyan and Kafka-esque dystopia in real time. Like, I don't think Philip K. Dick could have predicted this shit.
I think it's Pasolini that said that fascism will return under the guise of anti-fascism.
Yeah.
And I feel it really in my guts that that's what's happening. I mean, the people who advocate themselves, I mean, I've been censored, I've been attacked. You said you've been attacked also, but do you ever advocate any hate speech? Have you ever advocated any violence? I haven't.
No.
I love debating with the other side. I'm very polite with any contradictor. I like the intellectual exercise. There's not many questions that are taboo for me. And I really appreciate a good conversation and a good debate. And
I don't drink anymore, Victor, but I would definitely drink some wine and play chess with you for like a month.
Yeah,
Straight.
well, I'm not a very good chess player.
Excellent. That's helpful.
So
the problem becomes when you have that type of intellectual debate and you put thinking at the forefront of what society is supposed to be about, it creates this problem where the leaders can't control people as well.
You know, recently I have a good friend of mine, which is called Etienne Chouard, which is you could say he's more or less one of the intellectual leader of the Yellow Vests, right? And during an interview, he was questioned about the concentration camps, the existence. And he's basically said, well, I'm a philosopher. I don't know nothing about that. I don't feel entitled to express any opinion, right? He gave an intellectual response to a political question. a political question. So he was actually dragged 2 or 3 days ago. He had to go to the police because apparently someone filed a complaint against him for negation. We call it, how would you translate that, Nicki, into French? Negationism. Negationism. You know, there are actually laws in France that forbid any denial or even questioning of historical facts. So it seems strange to me. I mean, that questions, I think that questions in my mind, if you come to the point where you have to vote, have a law that prohibits someone to question historical facts, mainly the Holocaust, that questions the educational system, not the people who are stupidly denying facts. I mean, what kind of society is scared of weirdos? There are people who say that they've been abducted by aliens. Well, so what? There are actually people who think that your future is decided by the date of your birth. Other people think the world is flat. And those Holocaust deniers, I just tend to put them in the same category. What the fuck do I care what they think? And there are only a handful of them. And, you know, only not so many. So the fear, the incapacity to respond intelligently with culture, with education to those kind of people, I think it says it all. I mean, if a society as a whole is afraid of a bunch of weirdos, that says it all. Can you imagine how afraid they would be in front of a bunch of intelligent people? If they're afraid of weirdos, I can only imagine how scared they would be in front of people who know what they're talking about.
What happens when you get people who are afraid of weirdos, who encounter intelligent people, their first reaction is to lump them in with those weirdos, where I've mentioned this before, but if we were to go down to our local coffee shop, assuming they would let us in and sit down, which is not the case in California at the moment, but for the purposes of this intellectual exercise, let's say we are allowed to go into a coffee shop and there are other people there and it's relatively busy, and you took your laptop and you opened it up and you went to the CIA's own website and you started reading off the declassified information that the CIA themselves has put on their website. People would still say, "You are a tinfoil hat wearing motherfucker. I don't believe you." And it's not me who is saying this. It is the CIA who has declassified their own material. But people are so hardwired to shout conspiracy theorist at everything that that contradicts the narrative that they have heard from their preferred media bubble outlet, that that even something like pulling up the CIA's own website and allowing people to read that information will make them short out in their brain, and they will immediately label you a conspiracy theorist for sharing this information.
Well, look how the people reacted to the leaks of WikiLeaks. Classified crimes. They only hear classified.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't classify his crime if he can? What a wonderful world, as I always say, what a wonderful world where criminals can classify the proof of their crimes.
Mm.
I would classify any proof of my crime.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Does that make me a good person? No. So what are we talking about? And people only hear classified because apparently that's the thing that counts, because they've got that bureaucratic mentality where, oh, you did something wrong. You published a classified document. No, WikiLeaks published proofs of crime that happened to be classified, but that's just a detail.
Yeah. But I was going to say, well, you can't classify crimes, but the reason why people talk about only listen to half of the sentence is because they've been taught to do that. And the mainstream, our biggest enemy in this fight is the mainstream media. And instead of us chopping them down to size, we're begging them to tell the truth. when we know they will not tell the truth.
Mhm.
So our strategy from our side is flawed. We are trying to make friends with a
Our enemies.
terrible enemy. Well, they're not our friends. They will not be our friends, and I think that we need to expose them rather than to keep begging them to do the right thing when there's no way they will do it. If they were going to do the right thing, they would have done it over the last 10 years. It's not now that they're going to suddenly see the light. So we need to identify our enemies. And I think that, people are not, as much as they have been dumbed down through, misinformation or lack of information, people can still, work intelligently. And that's why they have to obliterate WikiLeaks, because people's minds will be able to work again once they are able to see the source documents and see the facts. They will eventually again start to put the puzzle together the way it should be put together. The pieces will fit. But the reason they don't want us to have immediate access to truth and knowledge is because they're terrified of us being able to think. They know we can think, as much as they've been trying to obliterate our minds and to dehumanize us as well. I was talking with Emmy actually about this yesterday, and we're talking about how they've dehumanized Julian. And I said, well, they haven't only dehumanized Julian, they've dehumanized all of us. Because if we were not dehumanized, we would not be watching this as if we're watching a game on TV. So they have also robbed us of our capacities, our human capacities, our humanity. They've taken that from us as well, not just from him. So it's not just, obviously not just political, it's also very philosophical. But we need to see what they did to us as well. That's why it's something that we should take personally as well, not just, oh, what happened.
This is something that is discussed.
Yeah, go on.
Discussed in cypherpunks, where they talk about the invention of the printing press, and they draw kind of a parallel to the way the Catholic Church went after Gutenberg and other people who had built a printing press, and that the printing press had to keep moving locations throughout Germany and then eventually into France, because the church would lock down the entire city where a printing press was located. And so it had to keep moving and moving and moving. And I kind of feel like the response from the Five Eyes countries to the existence of WikiLeaks is a parallel to the way that the Catholic Church treated the printing press. Victor, you're nodding and pointing, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond.
No, I totally agree. I mean, when the printing press arrived, it took the power out of the hands of the church, who basically controlled what was published, because they were the monks that used to rewrite the documents, and everything was controlled by the ruling class at that time. And printing was a form of democracy, which scared the hell out of them. So they survived that phase, but then the phase 2.0 arrived, where WikiLeaks proposed a new model of information, unfiltered and in huge volumes. And I think that actually did scare the shit out of them. Excuse my French.
And I guess to kind of continue that metaphor, because one of the first things produced in mass for the printing press was one of the things that most people were subjected to, but not allowed the right to read, which was, at the time, the Bible, where you were ruled by religious right, and that was essentially your life, and then there was a king that had to answer to the church. And in the same way that it essentially declassified the Bible for the average person to read, more or less, is the same way that WikiLeaks essentially. And so I think that's probably one of the best metaphors for where we're at relative to previous positions in history. When we just have to hope that as a collective group that our ability to harness the larger scale of technology can happen faster than the people who seek to control the world with it.
Credit goes to Jeremy Zimmerman for putting that concept into the public consciousness. And that's a guy that I would love to be able to get onto a vigil. So if anyone at all has contact information for Jeremy Zimmerman, please let him know that we would really like to talk to him.
I know the guy.
Me too.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get him on the show.
Okay.
You can all come back. We'll have a big fucking virtual picnic.
Hold your beer. I'll ask him.
All right. I've managed to hold my beer for almost 4 years now by not drinking any. The world is a better place for that too, by the way. It is. No one wants to see me drunk, I promise. Stoned? Oh, that's a completely different animal.
So here in France, some good news. One of the major magazines, French magazines, has agreed to publish an article about Julian Assange, which is not the typical mainstream article that has been published so far. I know because I wrote 50% of it, although I'm not signing it actually. But there was a journalist who had got the agreement, and she wanted me to check some of the points that she was trying to push forward, and she made a lot of mistakes. I mean, they really don't get the affair Julian Assange, do they? Mainstream media. But anyhow, we talked a lot on the phone. We rewrote some certain paragraphs and so forth and so on. And the second news is that one of the major French podcasts, which the average public views on each podcast, the minimum is of 300,000. They often reach 2 million. They will be doing a broadcast on the Julian Assange case pronto. Took us a few months to reach them.
That's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, but well.
Could you talk for a little bit, because I can't remember his name and I can't pronounce foreign names to save my life. But the gentleman over in France that got appointed to the position of justice minister, that was the former, not former, but a lawyer for WikiLeaks. Yeah, could you talk a little bit about the atmosphere surrounding that and what the people in France kind of think about that situation?
Ah, man, this guy is a controversial lawyer. Was a controversial lawyer. He was a declared hater of whistleblowers, but he was a friend of the president. So apparently, I'm walking on thin ice here. Apparently, someone thought it would be a good idea to appoint him to defend Julian Assange in France. He made a few interventions that I listened to that were quite good. He caught up with the case pretty quick. Things he said were correct. But then all of a sudden he's nominated Minister of Justice, and we haven't heard about the case. He was supposed to defend the political asylum request of Julian Assange to France. But we haven't heard anything about that case. As often with the legal team around Julian Assange, things just seem to disappear in thin air. Now that he's a minister, well, he's not allowed to be a lawyer. He can't do both at the same time. So everyone's speculating on what he will do, if he actually even remembers that he was once the lawyer of Julian Assange. I don't know. These guys are very political and controversial figures. They write a lot of books. They participate in shows. I haven't got the faintest idea. Hopefully, I'm hoping that he wasn't too hypocritical when he was defending Julian Assange, and he would actually do something. Although I must say that whatever the issue of that case, I don't think it would change very much, because people are all hyped up with the idea that France could grant political asylum to Julian Assange. I say, what the hell does that change? I mean, Ecuador granted political asylum to Julian Assange, and look what happened to him. So the problem is not France granting political asylum. The problem is England letting him go to eventually come to France. I mean, okay. I mean, if he's free from the British jails, Julian Assange, in my opinion, could practically go to any country in the world and settle down if he wished, I think. So I don't know, really. I've heard a lot of contradictions. People keep some hope. I don't believe that anything will come out of Dupond-Moretti.
Do you think we could do you think a coordinated international campaign to contact him in some way and ask him to make some kind of change or statement?
Actually, we've even been thinking about going to the Ministry of Justice and with our banners and reminding the guy that, and see if he kicks us out, the ex-lawyer of Julian Assange, if he kicks out the militants defending Julian Assange in front of his building. But it's summer, and in France, summer is sacred, and nothing happens in France in summer. So wait and see. I don't know. I never really trusted the guy. He gave me a good impression when he first started talking about the case. I saw him contradict some journalists during interviews in a good way. But then there are certain dark areas in, as I said, he expressed his opinions against whistleblowers and against dissidents in general. He's not a progressive, but something that he himself admitted, he's not a progressive, but whatever one thinks about Julian Assange, does he actually deserve 175 years in prison? And his answer was certainly no. So now that he's a minister, I don't know. I've got no idea. And I don't think anyone really has.
Well, I would love to help coordinate a digital campaign alongside of whatever physical campaign that you would like to do, because that's something that I feel like we do rather well here in being able to get at least strategically placed communications to people. So we might be able to help out with something like that. But yeah, thank you for that insight, by the way, because that's something that I didn't really know too much about that in particular. So thank you.
Okay, well, he doesn't have a very good opinion amongst the progressive in France. This lawyer I'm talking about, ex-lawyer, because he's defended some politicians who were evidently corrupt and managed to get him off the hook. So from that point of view, he's a good lawyer. Okay, but then again, getting off the hook a corrupted politician in France, that's not a major achievement. I mean.
Yeah, I think there's a vast difference between good lawyer and good person, and that's just based off the lawyers I've had an interaction with. I do know lawyers who are good people, but that's they're much fewer and further between than lawyers who are, bottom feeding scumfucks. No offense, Nicki. I don't count you in that category. I don't.
Well, with Dupond-Moretti, the problem is that he is privy to privileged information. They've had meetings. He knows. Let's hope he will act ethically, but nobody will be able to find out if he does or doesn't. But he has, as his lawyer, has had access to legally privileged information. So. And it seems like people near Julian get promoted out of the way. Amal got an award as well recently, Amal Clooney. I forget what award she got, but yeah. So if they can't get him out of the way, I think I don't know, I don't know exactly what went down there for him to get this position, but,
It's called the Get Out of the Way Award.
Yeah. It's called bribery, right? The real word is bribery. But anyway, let's just in any case, they spied on him for so long and they stole all his documents, so there's probably nothing new that they gave to Dupond-Moretti. They probably already know what it is that was discussed with Dupond-Moretti. we'll see what he does. But like you, I don't have great. I'm not inspired by confidence. Yeah. Out of all the people they could have picked, why him? And let's not forget they spent billions on trying to corner Julian. You know, it's not like he's a nobody over the last decade. How much have they spent all together? 10 billion was just with Ecuador with that IMF loan and all the other little perks. I think all of that was 10 billion US dollars.
I mean, back in like 2011 or 2012, there were no less than 100,000 people out of GCHQ alone that were part of their WikiLeaks task force. We don't have numbers for what the WikiLeaks task force in the US was, but it was multi-agency coordinated. It was, FBI, CIA, NSA, they all had their own little task force to go after Julian. The amount of money they spent on surveillance alone at the Ecuadorian embassy was in the tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. Go ahead.
I think the policing, if I'm not wrong, the policing on its own outside the embassy up until 2015, I think, if I'm not wrong, was about 13 million pounds. It's enormous when you think about the enormous cost. If somebody calculated the total cost just to get one guy, what are they thinking? I mean, how much more dangerous is he to them? And it's not that obvious really to all of us. But I mean, it's a fortune. It's I don't know what the total cost is, but it's not peanuts, So, and they did.
I would imagine that it would be able to end homelessness globally a handful of times over with enough left to provide universal health care for years. And then if you think about how much has been spent on paid propaganda against WikiLeaks, if you add that into the total, I mean, we're talking about more tens of millions of dollars in paying off journalists to write hit pieces like Luke fucking Harding, who still to this day, that article that he wrote on The Guardian, that absolute fabrication, a complete piece of fiction about Paul Manafort visiting Julian Assange in the embassy, still up to this day. No retraction has been issued. No corrections have been made. People are walking around believing this shit.
That's why we have to expose the DSMA system, the members on that committee from the media and from the Ministry of Defense, and we have to expose them to the point where people understand that none of those committee members from the media can be trusted with anything that could come close to what we would call information. It's at best misinformation. People should not waste their time or money on any of those committee members from the media. It's time for us to fight back. And the only way we can fight back is with truth. We don't have guns. The only thing we have is truth.
I have guns.
Oh, you have guns. Okay. I probably shoot the wrong person.
No, you know what? Mostly I shoot bowling pins because bowling pins make the best target shooting you could possibly imagine because they're made out of maple. So when you shoot one, it doesn't explode unless you're using like a really high caliber round. What it does is it spins and it moves. So then you have a moving target to shoot at for the next like couple of minutes while it's still moving, and you don't destroy your target. But that's neither here nor there. Look, I am a fan of our Second Amendment. I am not one of those people who hoards firearms or cuddles them before I go to bed or anything like that. It's not like it's a tool like any other tool that I own. And it's, you know, I honestly, I believe that the internet is a better weapon than a firearm.
Mm.
But
I honestly think whistleblowers should have Second Amendment protections just because of the nature, the way that our society is set up now. But also processing power and citizens to have the ability to stage digital protests. Like, you should be allowed to have some kind of collective processing and upload and download powers to be able to exercise your right to occupy a space, even if it's digitally.
Yeah, but the mind is the biggest weapon, and they will not do the act. They're not going to allow us that weapon.
the closing line in the opening section to Cypherpunks, where Julian says, our task is to secure self-determination where we can, hold back the coming dystopia where we cannot, and if all else fails, accelerate its self-destruction. Like, that's something that I think everybody listening right now and everybody that will listen should be circulating on all of their social media platforms, regardless of whether or not you are heavily algorithmically censored. I think that is a clarion call for activists, no matter what your activism is.
On the classical platforms, they'll get shadow banned. I'm shadow banned. I mean, I'm talking to myself on Twitter most of the time. What they do is, if you have anything to say that they think is dangerous, you'll be talking to yourself. So I'm also on alternative platforms like Mastodon and Gibberfish and what's the other one? Well, mainly on Mastodon because they cannot touch that unless they bring the whole thing down, but they can't censor it. So we also need to we can stay on the classical platforms like Twitter, and there's no reason to close the door on Twitter and Facebook. Of course, most people on those platforms know they are constantly being spied on, right? I mean, I assume they know. But if they can stay on those platforms and also be active on other platforms like in the diaspora, what they call the diaspora, on the open source other platforms like Mastodon, which is like Twitter. In fact, it's better than Twitter, and nobody can censor you. There's more of a discourse. Of course, there's more crazies also on those open platforms, but it's okay. We're smart. If I see a crazy, I block him. I don't need Mr. Twitter to block somebody for me.
A scary thing here in the U.S., Mike Pompeo actually has taken up a personal campaign attacking TikTok, which is a large alternative social media platform, which most people even watching this are probably like, what the fuck is TikTok? Like, why do I even care? But it's literally one of the largest social media platforms in the world. It's what most of the kids use nowadays, kind of thing.
Jesus Christ, you said that, didn't you?
Right. But essentially what the U.S. government at the spearhead of Mike Pompeo is trying to do is directly be able to remove a social media platform and lay the legal framework, and are doing it in this public way, blaming it on Chinese surveillance and interference, which may or may not be the case.
It's totally the case.
They'll call it a hostile intelligence service. Everything will be a hostile intelligence, foreign hostile intelligence service. This is Mike's law.
Well, what it's doing is it's going to start it's going to lay the legal framework for criminalizing certain aspects of social media. So eventually, if they can get TikTok legislatively taken out in a legal framework, they'll be able to go after Mastodon and Rockfin and Minds and all of these other basic independent platforms, regardless of what people think about them, honestly, because they're literally going to be able to say, we don't like that platform. It's not running X, Y, or Z algorithm, so it's not blocking foreign propaganda.
The 21st century McCarthyism.
Hey, Nikki, people in my chat are asking what your handle is on Mastodon. they would like to
Oh,
find you
yeah.
and hang out with.
I've got 2 accounts on Mastodon. One is Dreamtime Aquarium, and the other one is Katya's Compass. But I usually on the social media, I'm either Dreamtime Aquarium or Katya's Compass. But I'm also on Twitter, so if they ask me, I can. If they go on Twitter and on Katya's Campus, then because I've put it up anyway. I've put up my pinned tweet. I think shows my other accounts on Mastodon and Gibberfish. But I tend to, I tend to go to other places as well where I can be heard and where there's more interesting conversation. Actually, because it's not censored, it's the conversation is much more interesting. It's more honest. It's more raw. It's you can actually have a better discourse than on Twitter, where you have to, find. I was locked out once because I called somebody a bimbo. I was locked out of my account.
For bimbo?
A bimbo, yeah.
I say worse
what does that
ordering
mean in
cigarettes
Russian?
at the gas station.
I didn't mean in Russian. No, I called McCain's daughter a bimbo. That's why. It wasn't.
But isn't that a
I
Russian?
can.
Isn't that a Russian word that means something else?
It basically means like dumb white woman. Essentially, is the
Yeah, in
So,
English.
look,
but in Russian,
I
what does it mean in Russian?
For the record, Meghan McCain is a terrible fucking person, and bimbo is one of the nicer things that I think that you could say about her. Like she got traction in 2008 when her daddy was running for president by trying to be sex positive and saying, I can sleep with whoever I want to on this campaign trail because I'm a liberated woman. So bimbo is kind of like complimentary to the image she was trying to project, at least, back in 2008.
I got locked out. I had to apologize to get back in. I had to say she was a genius. Well, it's another way, it's another way of getting back to them, back at them. Say, okay, I was wrong. Meghan McCain is a genius. It's, saying the same thing, taking the piss out of them. But anyway, it's I'm just saying that people need to, we the oppressed class, and I count into the oppressed class, people, when we say working class, think we're talking about, only factory workers. Anyone who doesn't have the means of production, so doctors who work for hospitals for a salary, architects who work for somebody else for a salary, they don't have their own means of production, they are also the working class. So it's a big space. The working class is a big, we are the 99%. And we need to get organized. We're smart. We just need to get organized. And we've, Warren Buffett said that there's a class war and his class is winning. I mean, they're brandishing, sticking it in our faces as well. They're making fun of us, and we just we take it. But we need to get much more organized. And this was the role of WikiLeaks, was, a vanguard party in a way, not a political party, but it was a vanguard in terms of identifying and interpreting material reality, like giving it to us in raw source documents. So we were very close to what reality was. How can you react to anything if you don't know what reality is? So WikiLeaks' main purpose, and this is why they had to bring them down, was not because if we were truly naturally stupid, they wouldn't worry about anybody producing the truth. But they want to convince us that we're stupid. They want to, when they go through all that rhetoric about human nature and how most of us are dumb and most people shouldn't be allowed to vote and all that rubbish. So all of that rhetoric and propaganda to make us feel like we're lesser beings. So that we stay in our place. This has been done so many times before, in historical times. At one stage, women were incapable of thinking. Slaves were incapable. I mean, they have to, in order to colonize a people, you have to colonize their minds. And this is what they've been doing, colonizing our minds, dehumanizing us so that we accept this inhumanity, this blatant, full-on cruelty that's in our face, a slow murder. That's what we're witnessing. And then people turn around and say to me, "Oh, but you got to play within the rules, Nicki." I say, "Why? What rules? What rules are there left? which rules are standing still, because I don't see any standing anymore.
So one of the things, I think being organized is a very important thing, and it means a lot of different things to a lot of people when they say disorganized or decentralized and things like that. I think right now, one of the best things that people can do is be individually activated. And this is something that we've talked about a lot, the idea of decentralized activism, where it's organizing around an idea, but not necessarily around an institution or a person or anything like that. And it's literally just you and your friends going out and doing whatever activism you're comfortable with, or solely just yourself. And that's the basis of all activism, and then it just builds from there. But but like in Australia, for example, they've managed to get so many city councils to speak out in favor of Julian. And that's one person generally going to that city council over and over and developing and cultivating those relationships with those people to do that. And not in a political way, but just in a like, hey, this is what I believe in, let me teach you about it kind of way. And even like the yellow ribbons movement, going around and just tying up trees with yellow ribbons and writing Julian's name on it, or Free Assange, and putting posters up and things like that. You break the mundanity of the world. Like when someone drives down the street and on a bridge it says no more torture hanging from a banner, and on the next one it says Free Julian Assange. That makes a deep and long-lasting impact, because it'll probably be there 2 or 3 days, and then it'll get taken down by some authority paid by our tax dollars. And then when that person drives by that bridge again, they're like, where'd that no more torture sign go? Like, why'd they take that down? And and in each of those interactions, it creates so much more of an impact, because on social media, we talk to ourselves, but using like the rawest form of speech, which is just putting a sign up and walking away, it creates so many more individual interactions with that person. And then you can tailor it. Like here in the US, we have tons of veterans of foreign wars and American Legion outposts. Going there and putting up information about Julian is a way to reach those people. And there's still ways to get in contact with all these groups, even amid the lockdown, even without having to interact with them, but just strategically placed counter propaganda almost.
Well, they're stupid to put down banners, because that is so powerful. That this is what we need to be exposing. When they try to shut us down, we have to expose that. So for me, as a PR exercise on their side, it's a totally stupid move to put down these banners. Most people wouldn't even notice them until you put them down. But what we can do is, we definitely would love to have the Veterans Against War on our side. They could do fantastic work. Those people should not only be defending Julian and WikiLeaks, they should be doing their utmost to stop recruitment. We want to stop new kids being slaughtered.
It's interesting you say that, because the reason Eugene Debs was sent to prison was because he gave a speech trying to convince people not to sign up for the military. And this is 1918 when it happened. And ever since, like, speaking out against recruitment has been more or less criminalized. Now, we're fortunate in that we have spoken with Danny Shurson, who is a very prolific anti-war veteran and a very, very credible anti-war veteran. And the Veterans for Peace organization co-sponsored our actions in February and are doing so again. A couple of those gentlemen came down and stood with us the entire time that we were in DC. But it's such a, I don't know, draconian mood that is being set in terms of speaking out against recruitment, against military action. We have there's an article that I cite frequently on Slow News Day, and it's called 3 Cheers for Socialism. And one of the more undeniable sentences in it is Americans as a rule don't know our own history. And the reason we don't know our own history is because what is taught to us from primary school all the way through graduating secondary education before you get into university. It is government standardized textbooks where the entire history of the US has been whitewashed to the point to where it's a goddamn fairy tale.
Well, that's what empires do. That's exactly.
I read a book recently. I don't know if you've heard about it. I read a book recently about that subject. I think it's called "Lies My Teacher Told Me" or Taught Me.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with the book. I've seen excerpts. I haven't read it.
Called Everything the Teacher Told You Is a Lie. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the interesting part in this book, although it talks solely about the American history, but which I'm not totally aware of, but the author points out the fact that basically there are lies being told in the scholar books, textbooks, that are actually debunked by the historians themselves. I mean, any historian knows perfectly well that those facts are wrong, but they keep on being printed year after year in the textbooks. So that was quite an amazing, interesting aspect. As I say, the pursuit of truth is always a painful endeavor. If you think you're with the truth and you're in a comfort zone, that probably means that you're being how do you call it? Propagandized. I mean, the truth is a painful operation. I can tell a lie in a fraction of a second, but to tell a truth, I would need time. I would need investigation. I would need thought. I would need knowledge. Truth is a slow and long process. Lie is instantaneous. So if you're in a comfort zone, then you're supposed to be in danger. If you think, I've always noticed that people who get their information solely from the mainstream media, when they talk to me about the world, they're actually talking about a world that doesn't exist. Thus, the difficulty to communicate with them. Because although we might share some of the same values, they actually view the status of the world in a completely different way than I. So you might say, well, Victor, you could be wrong. Yeah, but maybe I am. But anyhow, I've invested an enormous amounts of time, enormous amounts of money. I've been to places. I've talked to thousands of people. I've interviewed people. I think I've got a pretty good idea of how the world works. Now, I might not have the truth, but I think I'm closer to the truth. And I think you never get really to the point of the truth. You can only hope to get closer to the truth. But debunking a lie is always an easier task than finding the truth, right? So what I try to dedicate myself with these people that inform themselves solely through mainstream media, I try and get them to the point where they think about what they themselves have heard and what they themselves know, and try to point out the contradictions that they haven't yet seen amongst the information that they have in their mind. I'm not trying to bring them many new facts. I'm just trying to show them that if they stop and think about it, then they can find themselves the contradictions in what they think is a sort of logical narrative that is being served to them. For instance, I don't know if I mentioned this the last time. There's one anecdote that I point out that is always a great success. I remember in Syria, at the beginning of the Russian intervention, the Russians, one of the first military operations was to bombard a convoy of trucks conveying petrol for apparently ISIS. You remember that? They said there were 1,000 trucks. Okay, a huge convoy. And then I asked the people, okay, you heard about that, right? And they say, yes. And I said, did they tell you where those trucks were driving to? They were going somewhere, weren't they? This petrol, they were going to sell it to someone, weren't they? I mean, why did the stories just stop brutally that the convoy was destroyed and no one was talking about where they were actually going? because apparently you don't send 1,000 trucks just roaming around in the desert. They had and then the people all of a sudden realized, yeah, I missed something. There's something missing in the information. I just stopped thinking about it. And that's what I call a shift in the narrative, a narrative rupture, if I may say so, where the mainstream media would start talking about a subject, then all of a sudden stop, where apparently any journalist worth a grain of salt, is that the expression, would go a step further. I mean, if I were talking about these trucks, I would say, well, they were going to supposedly to sell their petrol to someone. Who was the buyer? You know, you see what I mean? So I try to use what the people already know to try and make them understand where the cracks are in the story. And once I get my finger in the cracks, once I get the lies on the table, then I can try and restart, re-inform, or try again something else. But that's the main difficulty, that these people who inform themselves through mainstream media actually talk about a world that doesn't exist. So it's really hard to get through to them.
It's a fascinating concept to think that there are multiple realities that people are living in every single day, and that is primarily related to where they choose to get their information from. And I've talked about the concept of the internet being Pandora's box before, and it really, like, the way that we have centralized the internet now with social media, and we've made these centralized hubs like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram being the primary source for where people find their news. It creates like bubbles of competing ideologies, but most of those competing ideologies are repeating the same narratives, but just from different angles. And very rarely do we get to see the actual truth come out in terms of reporting or articles being linked on these centralized hubs, because they're so frequently censored either by algorithm or by individual. And it really, I mean, people will say like, oh, that guy lives on another fucking planet, don't listen to him. Well, it's more or less true, because people are on individual spheres of knowledge, of information, whether it's correct or incorrect. And so the task really is to find a way to, I don't know, break the information bubble or eliminate the tribalism that allows for groupthink to be the prevailing method of information distribution. Maybe I'm not making any sense. I don't know. I did a little DMT.
No, I think you do. But if we were to burst the bubble, I think we could be the initiative of bursting the bubble. I tried to burst my bubble, in the sense that I'd never hesitate to go and talk to people on the other side. I have no problem with that, and I actually listen to them. I like listening to people, be it a taxi driver or a right-wing militant or a monarchist or whatever, an anarchist, whatever. I mean, I'm always interested, as long as he doesn't go along hate speech and advocating violence. I mean, that's a step too far. I mean, I'm not in for any of that kind of stuff. But as an intellectual process, I take the steps to try and burst my bubble, because I need that. If I were to play ping pong with only my kids, I would never be better at ping pong. I mean, I need to play against people who contradict me, who point out my own contradictions. Maybe they have pieces of truth that I don't have. And I mean, I'm only a better person when I manage to admit that I was wrong, aren't I? Yes, I think I am. So we could be the ones to burst the bubble. I mean, we don't have to wait for the others to burst it. I get criticized because I burst that bubble often. Hey, why did you go and talk to this guy? I said, why not? If I had just been drinking a beer with the guy, he wouldn't have said anything. It happened to be that we started talking about politics instead of sports. Then all of a sudden you get mad because I'm talking to the same guy, but we're talking politics. Give me a break.
If I may say, the biggest burst to the bubble was WikiLeaks, and it's still,
Yes.
you know,
Big bang.
and we, you know, instant access to knowledge, instant access to the source information, to raw information, knowledge that gives us our angle, because we're talking about angles, knowledge that we can connect to because it's about us, it's our narrative. And we, as most of us are intelligent human beings, we don't have to be geniuses to process information like that. So it's knowledge that should be accessible to the ordinary person. You know, if we are responsible enough, if they allow us the right to vote, we should at least have the information we need to be able to vote. But for me, we had the weapon that burst the bubbles, and we still have some of it. It's not as vigorous as it used to be, but I think that we don't need to reinvent WikiLeaks. I mean, WikiLeaks is what we need, and we want Julian to come out and run it again. But we don't need to reinvent something we had that was great, that was giving us instant access to knowledge. You know what I mean?
No, what we need are more sites like WikiLeaks. We need more people with the courage of conviction to say, I am tired of media outlets telling me how to think and how to feel and what to read and what not to read. Here are the primary source documents. Here are the people who have, firsthand experience of this. Now it's up to you, the reader, the citizen, to take this information and do with it what you want, to digest it how you need to digest it, and to form an opinion based not on spin but on the facts of the matter. And that's not to say that I want WikiLeaks to go away. I certainly don't. I would, my hope with WikiLeaks was that it would pioneer an entire, generation of sites that had the same integrity, the same mission, and hopefully the result being people are better informed and people can form a more complete opinion about something.
But if people want to resist and they want to do an action now for Julian, one of the things they could do is keep going to WikiLeaks site, keep going, keep getting informed, do exactly what our oppressors don't want us to do. They want us to, turn our minds, our heads away, not only from Julian, but from what he revealed. So what we should do if we want to really resist, apart from we have to defend him, of course, but apart from that, we should be going to this humongous library, probably the biggest library we have in the world today, of information that is accessible for free to the entire world. And we should be going to that site we should be getting informed, and we should be exposing what they want hidden, whatever it is. So every time, that blob Pompeo opens his mouth, we should be giving him a reference to a cable. That will make him explode. He might self-combust on Twitter. Now, that's a good plan. We don't need to shoot him down, see? We just, give him a WikiLeaks reference.
He would probably,
Absolutely.
He would probably block you.
So Whitney Webb was on my show a week ago, I believe, and the subject of Henry Kissinger came up, and she referred to Kissinger as a gigantic blob of satanic jello.
Yeah.
Now, I feel like Mike Pompeo has also earned that moniker. So I think that we can apply that term to Pompeo without really stepping on Whitney's toes in regard to her summation of Kissinger. I think she'd be okay with that. I'm having her back on the show soon, so I'll be able to ask her that in real time. But I don't think she'd have a problem with that. I think a gigantic blob of satanic jello basically encompasses the entire Five Eyes Global Information Sharing Network and all of the many drones servants to this information sharing network that run around, invading our privacy and stealing our thoughts and then selling our privacy and thoughts to other 3-letter or 4-letter agencies. Gigantic blobs of satanic jello. That's my pep talk for the day.
Sorry about the. It's. I agree with you totally. But also in terms of what actions we can take that are simple and safe, for people who are worried. One of the actions we want to be taking is, now that Julian has a radio, people can be calling into the stations that he listens to dedicate songs to him. It's a way for us to communicate with him, since they won't let us talk with him. And hopefully these radio stations do play the songs we dedicate. And if they don't, then we'll expose them. We'll say, well, we've asked on so many occasions to play Tie a Yellow Ribbon round the old oak tree, and they refuse. So we'll give them bad publicity if they don't. But it's another action that allows people to act and stay in a safe space. It doesn't take time, doesn't cost anything, and it doesn't have to be just the stations that Julian listens to. All over the world, let's keep the name Julian Assange in people's consciousness. He's got to be in the airwaves. He's got to be around us, near us. We have to remember him. And so it's a simple action. People can, ring up podcasters, radio stations. Those are the easy ones to do. And even if Julian doesn't hear the song, if we can just do that on all stations, call the stations and ask them to play songs, particularly songs that were specifically composed for Julian. There's one done by Alex Hills, I think, with a violin. That's a beautiful one, very beautiful song. So it would be good also to promote the fantastic work that artists have done for Julian. And actually, good if you could on your show bring some more artists. We
are trying.
Yeah.
And again, man, Action for Assange is like 5 people, and the people that are in Discord, so like maybe 60 people altogether, and almost all of us have full-time jobs, families, stuff like that. So if anyone is in contact with an artist that is pro Assange, please communicate to them on our behalf. Hit me up on Twitter. I will give you my personal Proton Mail address so that we can facilitate this. I'm not proud. I don't, I am not above asking for help, and we need more help with what we're doing.
Amateur art, there's the group that goes to Belmarsh every Saturday. They did a short theatrical piece, which they called Act One. I loved it. It was just, and they're not professional actors, amateurs who put together a little script, which it was fantastic. I'll see if I can find it again. So people are really doing some really creative, brave. That's why I always say on Twitter, be creative, be brave, smile. And we've got some really good art from people who are not professionals. That particular theatrical piece that they did outside the Home Office, I thought was marvelous.
Oh, it's great. It was. When we went to DC in February, I was trying to kick around the idea of doing a mock trial, but I couldn't find human-sized kangaroo costumes. But I feel like that's not out of the scope of reality. I really hope that when we go back in September, we will be able to define our own reality. Unfortunately, the way that we have to accomplish that is through finances and people on the ground. So once again, Action for Assange has a GoFundMe. We are crowdfunding. We are trying to get ourselves back to DC. We have been able to put a deposit down on our accommodations while we're there. We need to double.
Are there no hotels that would sponsor your accommodation?
No, not even a little bit. We have because we're doing what we're doing,
Yeah.
and because of the more or less war zone that DC has become through the number of protests that have been happening there, hotels are very, very opposed to large groups of activists coming in.
Flyer points, you know, there's all these people with tons of frequent flyer points, and you can use them to get accommodation. Would any of them donate? Instead of money, they could donate their frequent flyer points.
Oh, it's a fantastic idea. I hadn't thought of that. We should make that a part of our pitch.
Yeah, ask for things like that, frequent flyer points. Also, if anyone's willing to sponsor, maybe not the hotel directly, or maybe airlines might be willing, because they're in deep shit right now, right? So they need good publicity. Perhaps be an airline that would be willing to sponsor your accommodation and your travel to DC. So see what you can get from sponsorship. Anything that, you know, anything you can't get in cash, try to get in kind. So sponsorship is the way to go, and frequent flyer points.
We'll demonstrate for food.
Right. We'll protest for a bag of herb.
There are people that give you vouchers that will say, "Come to our restaurant for free." There are people that would do it. You know, not everybody. You know, apart from that blob, Pompeo, I'm sure there's lots of people in the States who support Julian. But as you know, I mean, we don't see them because there's so much repression. But I'm sure that there are people that would sponsor you, maybe not in cash, and in exchange for a bit of publicity as well, maybe, or who would do it, because it's easier for them to sponsor that way than to do it with cash. There are many ways to get where you want to.
And while we're kind of discussing this, I would like to put out a call for anyone who is in contact with larger platforms on streaming channels. Like, if you've got an in with a big content creator, help us get onto that platform, because we've been mostly shut out from the larger spaces on YouTube and other streaming platforms, and I'm not entirely sure that it's all our fault this time. Like, I genuinely don't think that my mouth wrote a check that my body couldn't cash this time.
Yeah, no, sometimes it takes a bit of time to get known, but look, I've discovered fantastic programs in America. First of all, I've discovered amazing podcasters, amazing podcasts. I forget the name. There's one run by Veterans Against War, and I forget the name of it. Amazing podcast.
Is it Fortress on a Hill?
Sorry?
Is it Fortress on a Hill?
No, that doesn't ring a bell.
Okay, that's a fantastic podcast, by the way. That's Danny Schertzen and two other vets.
It also had some fantastic music, art, other things. You know, it was very cultural. It was political and cultural. So I used to follow it a while back, more consistently, and I haven't listened to it for a while. But, I think the States has amazing podcasts, and now pretty good, really good visual streaming. It's a question of getting known. And once you get known by the few key people, then the rest of them will come on, and it sometimes it just takes a little bit of time, and you need to also allow people to interact. The ones that are the most successful are the ones where there's interaction with the public, because when people watch something live, they want to be able to interact, maybe a little bit more than through chat. For example, George Galloway occasionally allows phone calls. People call in, and I think it's good. I think it's he can have a little debate, live. I'm not saying it should happen throughout the 2-hour vigil, but it would be good to have, 10 minutes of people who call in, I think you're doing well. I watch your streams. And yeah, you probably are getting some interference from who. our oppressors.
We call him Kevin. That's our all-encompassing term for the NSA agent tasked to monitor the chat.
Yeah.
He's Kevin. In the UK, it's Trevor.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the French version of a Trevor or a Kevin would be, but
Macron. Well, look, you should take that as a compliment, because if they think that they should be watching you and censoring you, that means that your content is good.
And the other thing that it means, right? So we know through WikiLeaks disclosures that the intelligence communities specifically target WikiLeaks activists.
Yeah.
And this is like one of those, I don't know, like self-detrimental kind of things. But if enough people begin doing enough actions and talking to enough people, that requires human effort to examine everything and put a final check mark. And it wastes the time of intelligence communities, because they have all this technology and sophisticated resources, but at the end of the day, they still have to pay somebody to do it. And even if them writing those little checks to the people at the bottom that are chasing around trolls on the internet and shit like that, it still matters, because that's taking their time away. And that's what these intelligence communities ultimately try to do, is to slow activists down, to get in front of them, to capture what their movement is about. So being able to recognize, like, hey, this is a super important topic, this is something that I'm going to be surveilled for, I'm going to run with it, because it creates all of these other issues for those communities that they're, by their own policies, forced to track. Like Susie Dawson's Freeing Julian Assange Part 3 is absolutely wonderful. And it basically outlines how if you put an idea out into the ether, it is required by an intelligence policy manual that they investigate how you may do that. So you just start shooting stupid ideas out into the ether that forces them to investigate it. And it sounds absurd, but it creates this situation where they either say, well, this guy's an idiot, look away, and then you just keep running, or they put time and energy and investment into something that's ultimately designed to just suck away time, energy, and investment, while also creating these larger social changes. So I don't know, being an activist in support of Julian, just being able to recognize all the mechanics is just so interesting.
We need to use culture a lot more than what we are. It's very powerful, you know, songs, all art. It's very, very powerful. Look at Chile, for example. You know, when you see masses of people, those millions that were singing, I mean, it really lifts, you know, you're not in the, oh my God, I've got to have a revolution. You know, I mean, you go into this war with a smile and, you know, you're happy about it. No, you know, I'm not trying to minimize, but we are in a war, okay? I mean, we are. They want to turn us into idiots and throw us into the dark ages, and we don't want to go there. So we are in this very strong struggle right now. But we have so much going for us in terms of, culture is the way to recruit people and to keep them away from, you know, being recruited by those monsters who want to send them off to their deaths or to go and kill people. So I think. You know, it's what Che Guevara said, because, you know, he's one of my heroes, when he said a true revolutionary has love in their hearts. It's all about love, really. I mean, you've got love in your heart, you fight. That's, you know, it's not just a word. It's not just, you know, a sitcom. Love is action, and loving humanity means you fight for that. You know, it's not just something, you know, ethereal or abstract. You know, it's action. And so people who believe in a better life, a better world need to have the courage to get that. You don't just, happiness is not going to drop out of the sky. You know, it's again, you know, we look back to what we've inherited from the past, and you know, since I'm Greek, I always quote Thucydides, one of our historians, that said the secret to happiness is freedom, and the secret to freedom is courage, or something like that. I might have mucked it up now, but anyway, it's all about, you know, what's freedom, what's courage, and that's how you get happiness. You can't be happy when you're a slave. You don't, you know, you can never experience happiness when you're stuck in a little box, in a little cage that somebody who thinks they're better than you has designed for you. So again, see, it all takes us back to, again, we want our WikiLeaks, we want our Julian, We love him. He's our hero. He's our vanguard. And we're going to fight for him. And the other side has to realize that it's not going to go away no matter what they do. Because sometimes people say to me, what if they kill him? I said, it's still not going to go away. This is never going to go away, no matter what they do. But we do have to stop them from killing him, because they're trying that right now as we speak.
Yeah, and it's actually, I think it's the last 4 hearings, it may be 5 now. He hasn't even been able to attend via video link because he's been called unwell, just as a blanket term, without any real rhyme, reason, true definition to that statement. So it's something that terrifies the hell out of me, because what the hell does unwell mean while he's in a prison that people have died from coronavirus?
Well, I've done an FOI to Belmarsh about that, actually. I want to know all about their conditions, how they decided that he should not be released. And I got a response where they said they didn't understand my questions. So I have to go back and make them more specific, because we've got reports. We've got the COCA report, I think it's called, that was sounding the alarm bells. I mean, if you read that report, it's serious, very serious. Yeah, he's definitely, especially since he's not even a convicted prisoner. He's on remand, has a presumption of innocence, of course, and he's got all these vulnerabilities. If he dies in prison, these people who made this decision to keep him in prison have to go to jail for torture, murder, and crimes against humanity. And I will push that till the day I die. And I hope it doesn't happen soon. But for me, as I said the other time we spoke, this is already a crime against humanity. I can I won't do it now because it's a bit technical. For me, already we're in that, we've crossed that red line. We're already in the crime against humanity, and whoever has made these decisions to keep torturing him, to ignore what Neil Smeltzer said about the torture, to ignore what the doctor said, to ignore these reports, especially the last one about the conditions in prison, to ignore the fact that 2 people have died, are culpable already for torture. Already, if they kill him, if they kill him, it's murder. It's murder with malice aforethought, full-on murder. So if any of them are watching, and even when I watched one of the Belmarsh vigil, not vigil, yeah, it's a vigil. When they protest outside Belmarsh, and one of the guards came out and was saying, I support you, but please move away. Look, the reality is that these guards, they have to read the law, and so that if they're given an unlawful order, they have the right to say, I'm not going to follow this order because it's unlawful. They need to educate themselves. It's not good enough for them to say, well, I'm just doing my job. So did Hitler's people. It's not good enough. They have to get educated. They can do it through their trade unions, or they can open a book and they can find out which of the orders they're given in there are legal and which ones are illegal, and they must disobey illegal orders.
That's such a fantastic point. I've spoken to a number of veterans about what brought about the end of Vietnam. And in conjunction with mass civilian protests, what really pushed it over the edge was individual troops refusing to obey orders that they determined were unjust or unlawful, and individual troops fragging senior officers. And that, way more than the civilian protests, were what brought about the cessation of the Vietnam War. I don't know what the caliber of the average U.S. soldier is in a all-volunteer army, because again, Vietnam, we had a draft, and people were conscripted more or less. Now we have a poverty draft, where
so it's not volunteer. They have to. They've got no other options. They join the army.
Yeah. But that's such a great point, and I'm glad that we do have a number of anti-war podcasts and anti-war shows by veterans who can explain this with way more authority than a tattooed up long hair on YouTube.
You should get a couple of them on your show.
We have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because some of their political discussions, they're amazing. We've got to stop the US from child abuse. So teaching a child to kill through video games, as far as I'm concerned, is child abuse.
And so I had that fucking argument with my sister and my mother because they have young kids that play Fortnite. Like, I don't want to give ages or anything. They're not like babies, but they're young kids playing Fortnite. And my daughter asked me like, "Hey Dad, can I play?" And I say no. And I turn in, like, this whole situation happens, and I basically have to explain to a couple grown-ups that you shouldn't allow a child of developing years, especially at that age, to gain the synapses of getting enjoyment from watching and participating in people being killed.
Yeah.
And that was like flabbergasting. Like, no one had ever thought that about a person under the age of 10 playing a shoot 'em up game. And I'm like, probably shouldn't let them have fun killing people.
Not only is it a child abuse, as far as I'm concerned, it's also hate speech. It's a form of hate speech. It's, the right to free expression, your First Amendment, there are limits to it. So I don't even know how these people who create these games, where even if it's for, older kids, I don't know how they can, get this kind of horror past. Definitely, I think definitely should not be allowed for the eyes of children or minors, not necessarily children. I don't think that this kind of inciting to hatred and violence through a game should be allowed for minors, at least for minors. It should be, like you've got movies that are X-rated, but there should be games that are X-rated as well. You know what I mean?
So we've got
yeah, go ahead, Victor.
Okay.
I had a conversation with my sons about these video games recently, a while ago, and it was along the same lines. You're killing people and everything, and then my son says to me, "Well, Dad, it's only a pretend. We don't actually kill. So what's wrong with that, right?" That's the usual argument. And I said to him, "Well, what if I published a pedophilia video game? It's only pretend. It would only be pretend. What would be wrong with that? Would you accept that?" Silence.
Yeah.
Because
See,
actually,
Sorry,
and the paradox, because I rubbed some salt into the wound, the paradox is that if you're a pedophile, you would be condemned to a lesser sentence than if you were a murderer. But pretending to be a murderer is okay, but pretending to be a pedophile is not. So it's absolutely just a cultural posture. How would you say that in English?
Well, I'm personally a gamer myself, and I've played games
Shame on you.
for forever. But the good news is I'm probably one of the first fragments of the gaming culture to break away because of neoliberalization and the destruction of that culture based on the exploitation of profit from it. So hopefully within the next decade, more people in there will recognize that the same person that's taking their paycheck away is the same person that's taking their video games away. And then we'll have a really interesting social movement that comes out of there too.
I am not a gamer. Well, when video games,
you shoot for real.
Well, yeah, but I don't shoot people. I just when I was growing, I'm 42, so when I was growing up, like Atari was around, like the first 8 and 16-bit Nintendo systems were around. By the time gaming systems started to get way more technologically advanced and the graphics became incredible and almost lifelike, I had already discovered chicks and LSD. So it was much more important for me to hang out with chicks and take psychedelics than it was to lock myself away in a room and do this shit for hours on end. But Yeah, it's my own experience, and other people have had remarkably different experiences and have gone on to lead very productive and positive lives.
But those games are made to make you react as if you're, they're supposed to addict you. They actually do work on your mind in a way that gets you addicted in the same way that a physical drug would.
No, it's all about the endorphins released when you do something good, the fear or panic released when you do something wrong, and the desensitization to violence.
But teaching children to get endorphins by killing, play killing, teaching them to have a high from that, it shows a really sick society. And for me, this is child abuse. And I'm surprised, shocked that the people in charge of child abuse, whatever, who are supposed to be protecting children, have said nothing about this, as far as I know. Maybe they have. But I don't think anyone's made a fuss about it at all.
Well, one of the things that have been lost in video game culture, too, is a large-scale organizing and teaching people how to organize. And that seems kind of weird, but in like the original eras of online gaming, even with shoot 'em up and killing people games, you had to build a community of people. You had to find sometimes a few dozen, sometimes a couple hundred. In some cases, it was people getting thousands of players against other thousands of players. And the thing that the video game culture in the recent iterations has done is literally remove all sense of community from video games, to where it's you, your controller, and maybe one or two people in real life that you know, or one or two friends from the internet.
Junkies. That's what happens to junkies. Junkies are isolated. They may shoot with other people or whatever they do, but they're isolated.
And that's honestly one of the biggest losses, because in those old era, and this is really like arbitrary and fucking bullshit, but it taught people how to look at the way the system operated relative to them and develop a strategy based on the tools that they had to respond to it. And you would develop that strategy alongside of hundreds of other people to overcome the oppression that the system is designed to push against you. And so I think once those people that think in that way need to find another outlet for that type of expression over the just shoot 'em up dopamine, it's going to be a really weird time in history when people that go from online strategizing to how to reclaim our rights.
Well, at least to protect children, at least that, because it's different for an adult to be engaging in this kind of activity. There's it's different for a child to be getting joy out of this horror.
I think it's a way of distancing yourself from reality. I noticed a thing that when people are interviewed after a shootout in the United States, particularly in the United States, but that's practically the only place in the world where they happen, often the witnesses will say something along the lines, "It was like in a film." Since when do you describe reality referring to a film? It's incredible that the mind starts working in that way, as if they're discovering something. And then all of a sudden, these young guys that go to war in Iraq or whatever, they discover that a bullet wound is not like in a movie. You don't say, "ouch," and you keep on walking when you get a bullet. The fucking thing really hurts, and you're really badly hurt, and you might never recover from it, and so forth and so on. So it's just
and the other thing, just to add to that, your friend doesn't come back when he dies. The guy next to you doesn't come back 8 seconds later,
and he doesn't have a shield of invincibility.
One of the problems with all of this, the gaming and the movies and all that, where people's reality has become the movies and the games. That's where they live. One day they'll get old and they'll have memories of a movie. They won't have their own memories. And you go out with people and they're on their phones. Even ordinary people are no longer connecting and discussing anything that's real. So this is a danger, and it's also a danger we have the same problem with words. People say war crimes and it doesn't mean anything.
Or extradition.
It doesn't mean, yeah. For example, now when I talk about war crimes on Twitter, for example, I put up the section in the Statute of Rome that has a list of what these are, so that, you know, it's not just two words next to each other. It's a list of things, acts that are included in this, under this umbrella that describes various war crimes. And so we need to get, yeah, not only our narrative back, our language, the meaning of words. We need to protect children from this, you know, this future, because it's going to be even worse when for them. It's going to, you know, I mean, at least we have, as Julian said, we are probably the last free generation. We are probably the last ones that can react. If we don't, we will very quickly, I think, go back into the dark ages. You know, we've lost civilizations before. It can be done. You know, I mean, we had amazing civilizations, you know, pre-Christ era. And very soon after that, they burnt the big library in Alexandria, 600,000 books. Very soon after that, we went into a very long period of the dark ages, with the church controlling what we're allowed to know, what we're allowed to not know. And, you know, you can see that in everything, the art, in everything. Everything just went down the toilet. So it's fragile. Culture, civilization is very fragile. And if we don't protect it, we'll end up, they'll turn us into beasts. You know,
So we have to start wrapping up here in a little bit. We probably got a couple minutes, but to piggyback off of that, as just I'll put it as like kind of my final thought, I guess.
Yeah.
The way we're seeing the world transform right now is in line with theology. It's called the religion of science, or pseudoscience.
Yeah.
Essentially, where it is science tells you must cover your face, otherwise you sin. And these basic things that are now being rolled out, and science will tell you that you have to stand in this line to get this shot. And all of these other mechanisms that they're going to now use that were used in the same way the instruments of religion were used to control the masses. And it's literally just whatever colloquialism they put over it to control the population.
Yeah, and in an increasingly secular society, the same energy that once went into religion has gone into political identity, and the science is related by the television.
Yeah, well, once it was the church that had control of science, and that's what got people like Galileo into big trouble, because he told another truth teller. The fact that he was right, you know, we discovered, you know, the church, I think, admitted he was right quite recently, actually. You know, Galileo. It took them a few hundred years to finally say, well, okay, he was right. The earth turns around the sun.
Well, that's part of the scientific method, though, right? Like, they have to make sure that the church can validate all of the information.
Yeah, today's church is, you know, it's these, you know, it's the ruling capitalist finance capital that is today's church. They decide what science is. It's very politicized. Science is not independent in most countries anymore. Definitely not in capitalist countries, I hate to say, because it's all about profit. So the economic model has a lot to do with how truthful science is going to be as well.
A few years ago, I read an article, I can't remember where and by whom it was written, but an article that said that in the United States, in the police and in the military, more and more they had problems with the behavior of the policemen and the soldiers, in the sense that they had the tendency to behave the way they saw policemen or soldiers behave in the movies. So they had this idea that this is how I'm supposed to behave, and they were reproducing the behavior of the actors and the fiction, thinking that that was how you're supposed to behave. And it was a problem, because in real life, that's not how you behave. That's not that's not the sound of a real punch in the face, what you hear in the movie. If you've ever been in a fist fight, you know that that's not how it works. You know that it's awfully painful to punch someone in the face, and so forth and so on. So I think WikiLeaks, once again, with the leak on the Iraqi war, well, they just revealed the truth. They revealed that a soldier, not all of them are heroes. Some can actually walk out of an armored car walk to a young Iraqi girl, 13, 14, with a yellow dress, pull out a gun and shoot her in the head, and climb back in the armored car and drive away. Where does he fit in this narrative of heroes going to war to defend their country and so forth and so on? But the people are really focused on the fact that apparently WikiLeaks did the unmentionable, reveal the truth, classified or not. That's it. Do we want to believe in a? Do we want to live in a make-believe world, or is the truth so painful that we prefer to hide from it? I prefer the truth anyhow, however painful. I know I'm gonna die. I know.
And could we get some final thoughts from you, Nicki, and where people can find you?
I'm on Twitter, mainly. I'm on Mastodon. I will put those details again once I get back to Twitter. So on Twitter, I'm Katya. So the little Arabaz thing, what's it called? That's the French
Apostrophe.
yeah, the little A thing. Sorry,
Ampersand. Ampersand.
Yeah, I was thinking the French word. Katya, Katya _compass, like a normal compass. And I think my pinned tweet has my other accounts on Mastodon. I have several, but I generally go to Mastodon and Gibberfish, which is spelled GIBBER fish, and and fish. So, but I generally, when I go to alternative media, will go to Mastodon. Some of my stuff is published on my own website, which is I should have given the link before. Well, my website is also on Twitter. So I generally use names like Dreamtime Aquarium, which comes from a book I wrote. If anyone wants to check out my book, it's about revolution. It was written for young adults. It's a dystopia, utopia. It has a happy ending. The revolution happens and it's won by the people. But I think we need to educate the young. We need to get them thinking. So I write for young and old. So this book is called A Maritime Historica, if anyone wants to check it out. And I would love it if a gamer wanted to turn it into a game, because this is a war towards peace. It's a revolution that takes people to a better place. I've written another book in French, Juste une gifle. It's just one slap, about women, violence against women. I'm taking up a lot of your time. All of this is on Twitter. So I write books, I write screenplays. I wrote a screenplay recently about hacking and lawyers and journalists. So I'm trying to get that produced, but it's a bit of a hot potato because the backdrop is all reality. So in the backdrop, it's not Julian in it, but there are posters of Julian with a mask thing, because the themes are about freedom of the press, lawyers, journalists, etc. So yeah, I've ranted on there, but a lot of that information is on my Twitter handle. I will stop.
And where can people find you at, Victor?
Well, I basically communicate in French. So if there are any French speakers out there, they just have to look for Le Grand Soir, which is the name of the website and the Twitter account and the Facebook page. Le Grand Soir. If there are any French speakers, they know.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Zigmund, Zigmund. You can find us on Twitter at action_4Assange, or at action4Assange.com. And I just want to thank everybody for watching us today. And again, we do have that GoFundMe up. So if you would like to join us in DC, please do so. We're going to be there for the full three-week rendition hearing in September. But if you can at least help us circulate the link, it goes a really long way to getting us there and getting all these events we're planning actually organized.
Could you publish it on the as a message so I could copy it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, I don't have that up on this computer. At any rate, my name is Steve Poikin, and I host a show called Slow News Day. You can find it here on YouTube by typing in Slow News Day Podcast into your search bar. I am also on Rockfin and DLive. I'm hoping to get on a couple of more platforms, but I don't want to kill my tech guy. But at any rate, tomorrow I have a double bill on the Big Ass Sunday show. The first hour will be Kit Cabello from Hard Lens Media, and that will be a fantastic conversation. And then I will be joined by the distractingly beautiful Natalie Riviera Scott and Stephanie Valerio. And that'll just be a whole big fat bag of fun. So make sure that you're there for that. I've been having on former Green Party presidential candidates this past week, and we are basically exposing the rot and corruption inside the Green Party. So making lots of friends with that. Straight the fuck up. I'm getting a little bit of flack for it, which I enjoy. As I told Ian Schlackman while we were discussing the possibility of him coming on for his basically tell-all interview, I'm on the side of the truth. And if that truth is uncomfortable, it's only uncomfortable for the people who are being harmed by the truth coming to light. So, as Carl Sagan said, if it can be destroyed by the truth, then it deserves to be destroyed. Good luck to us all.